The story of the birth of Jesus, as told in the Gospel according to Luke, does not begin with Mary and Joseph. It begins with a priest, an older priest. By older, I think he was like 40. And his wife, who was also up there in years, Elizabeth, I think she was 38. They had been trying for a long, long time to have kids, and no luck. And they had given up. They'd declared that Elizabeth was barren, and they weren't going to have any kids. And then one day, an angel of the Lord appeared to Elizabeth and informed her that she was going to become pregnant, and that it was going to be a boy, and her son was going to be a very important person in the world. He was to be blessed by God, and he was going to be a really important guy. He was going to be here to sort of pave the way for the Messiah. Well, this really surprised Elizabeth, and she said, I'm kind of up there in age. I don't know whether I'm going to be having kids or not. And the angel said, no, this is for a purpose. It's to prove that God can do anything. He can even make an older, barren woman pregnant. So she said, well, who's going to go tell Zechariah? And the angel said, I will. So a couple days later, the angel goes to Zechariah and he says, got good news for you. Elizabeth is going to get pregnant. He said, whoa, really? How's that going to be? And so he tells him the story, what's all's going to happen. And Zechariah said, we're both pretty old. I don't know if this is going to unfold or not. And so the angel said, if you're doubting me, you don't get to speak anymore. No speak. And thus was the beginning of ASL, of sign language.
American Sign Language?
I don't know if it's American. SL. Aramaic Sign Language, ASL. So here's Zechariah. He can't talk until these things come to be proven to be true. And sure enough, a few months later, Elizabeth turns out pregnant. And she doesn't know what to do, so she tries hiding it, for a while, and pretty soon that wasn't working too good. And so finally she fesses up and she tells Zechariah, and they thought about it for a while. They had a young lady from a different village came in and lived with them for a while. But then, she had to come out and admit that she was pregnant. So she went ahead and had this baby, and according to doing what the angel told her to do, they named it John. And so when it came time to name the baby, Zechariah had to write, he couldn't chisel out a stone. I don't know, he must have had papyrus or something. But he wrote on there that it was going to, the name was to be John. Because following their tradition, it should have been Zechariah too. But he says, no, it's just to be John. And so as soon as they named this baby John, boom, back comes his voice. So the prophecy was true. The angel was telling the truth. So then this kind of fades. This scene fades, and then we go on to more of what we expect, in the book, Gospel according to Luke. And it starts again. It said, in this age came a decree from Rome. Augustus Caesar decreed that there was to be a census because he wanted to count all the people in his empire. So everybody had to go be counted, and the way that the Hebrews decided to do it was that they would go to their village of your origin. And since everybody went to the village that they originally came from, and they talk about how there was this carpenter named Joseph, and he had this wife, and her name was Mary, and she was supposedly a virgin, but she was pregnant. They didn't really explain that too much, but so they went ahead, and it was time for them to be counted. Well, this, Mary's getting really big. It's time for her to deliver. And what I'm going to be talking about today is fear. I got to thinking, boy, you talk about fear. How would you like to ride for 3 days on a donkey, the day before you're going to give birth? I think that would have instigated some fear. So they had to go about 45 miles, and I think of that as about like between here and Palmer, and that makes about sense. From here to Eagle River on day 1, Eagle River to Cluton on day 2, and then on to Palmer on day 3. So it's about a 3-day trip. And she gets there, and they go to the hotel, and the hotel's full, so they end up in the stable out back, and she has the baby. Talk about more fear. She doesn't have a midwife there. She doesn't have her mother. She doesn't have, aunts and uncles or, people to help give her advice and everything else. She's there by herself. And here's this poor, 13-year-old girl having a baby with no help. Well, she has the baby, she wraps it in swaddling clothes, and she lays it in the manger, the little hay bin for the animals to feed out of. So about that time, this angel, the aforementioned angel, appears before these shepherds out in the field. And you can just see that, they're kind of the hay fields out around Palmer, and all of a sudden this bright light comes out of nowhere and informs these shepherds that the new king of the Jews has been born. And this is the new king, the new leader, the Son of God is here. And first they were scared, and they said, "Fear not, our news is good." And they said, "We got to check this out." So the angel leaves, and they're talking, and they decide, we're going to leave the sheep, and we're going to beat feet into town and find this. So they go into town, they go up to the hotel, probably the Palmer Hotel area, and they check it out. Well, no, the place is full. Oh, but we had a couple come by earlier, and there wasn't any room for them, so we told them that they could use a stable out back. So they went out back, and the angel had told them that they would find the new king wrapped in swaddling clothes in a manger. They go out there, and sure enough, there is this baby in swaddling clothes in a manger. And so they fall to their knees, and they start singing, and boy, everybody is great, and this is the new king. And they decided, well, we got to go spread the word. So they went out, and they started spreading the word to everybody, and they came back, and they're singing. The angel shows up again, and the angels are singing, and the shepherds are singing, and Joseph's singing, and Mary's singing, everybody's singing. That's where all this singing at Christmas comes from, you see. Now we've got this new baby, and then this thing kind of fades away again, and there isn't much you hear about this baby Joseph. But you see, these storytellers, they are awesome. This thing has more twists and plots than the days of our lives. Come to find out, who was this young girl that came to visit Elizabeth when she was pregnant? Her cousin Mary. And where did Mary go when everybody found out she was pregnant? And she says, "Oh yeah, it was the Holy Spirit." They said, "Yeah, Holy Spirit, you better get out of town. We don't want to have the shame of having you around." So they sent her off to her distant cousin Elizabeth. And now you know the rest of the story. See, they don't tell all these things in the traditional Christian stuff. So now you have an idea. This is a very, very different account of the birth of Jesus than we had last week when we looked at it with Matthew, where we had the wise guys and the angels and following the star. Well, thank you, Jenna. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. And choir, you guys are wonderful. Thank you so very much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out and braving these slick roads out there. Boy, it's tricky because places are great, and then when you don't expect it, it's really slippery. So be careful out there, and thank you all for coming out, and welcome to the Alaska Center for Spiritual Living. The title of my talk today is The 5 Faces of Fear. Last week I got some interesting feedback on my talk. One person asked, why so much about the Bible? Why are you always talking about the Bible? If I wanted to get Bible stories, I'd go to a regular Christian church. And then another person questioned the truthfulness or the veracity of the stories, the accurate nature of the stories. And I realized I had forgotten to do something. And I want to make sure that we have it now. These stories were all handed down in the oral tradition. The earliest of the Christian Gospels were those were probably the Pauline letters, and those were at least one generation father to son before they were actually ever written down. The Gospels that we've been talking about, specifically Matthew and Luke, and these accounts of the birth of Jesus were probably passed down 2 to 3 times from father to son. They were told and retold and retold. And for those of you that are real students of the Bible, you realize that in this account that I just gave, as a storyteller, I took great liberties. Well, storytellers of that era took great liberties too. These weren't meant to be factual historical accounts. And they often preceded their stories by saying, we don't know whether it happened this way or not. Whether it did or it didn't isn't important. What is important is the story. And so that's what I'm here today is to talk about the story and talk about how I look at perhaps the importance of it and give you some ideas of maybe how you can look at the importance of these stories. And they are important. It doesn't make any difference if you're a dedicated Christian, if you're Catholic, or if you're any other religious background. The stories still have the same importance. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about these 5 stories. We're going to talk about the 5 characters in this account, the one in Luke, and the fears that they faced. And then we're going to talk about some ways that we can all deal with those fears in our lives today. The 5 characters in this story and the fears that they faced. First of all, I'm going to talk about Mary and the fear of inadequacy. The first thing that went through Mary's mind is that I am not worthy to be the mother of the perfect one. And we all feel inadequate at times. I'm not worthy of that promotion. I'm not worthy of that perfect relationship. I'm not worthy of good fortune. And bless Linda for this sacred reading. This is awesome. This absolutely nails it. Fear often stops us from taking that next step toward being joyously fulfilled. We let it prevent us from asking the boss for a raise, taking a new class, beginning a new business, or introducing ourselves to a potential new friend. We let fear stop us. And it's fear that we are inadequate, that we are not good enough. It's illustrated this story of a young man, a boy, was standing out in front of the grocery store in a small town that he lived in, waiting for his mom to pick him up. And a man walked by, and the man asked him, he says, "Pardon me, son, could you tell me where the post office is?" And the little kid says, "Sure, mister. You go down this straight 2 blocks, take a right, and you go down another block, and it's the big building on your left." He says, "Well, thank you, son. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you. I really appreciate it." He says, I'm the new preacher here in town, and we're going to be having services here on Sunday, and I'd like to invite you to come to our service on Sunday. If you come to our church, I can show you the way to heaven." Little kid looks at him and says, "Yeah, right, mister. You can't even find the post office." Fear of inadequacy. Preacher was feeling inadequate at that moment. Joseph had a fear of disapproval. Imagine, now Joseph, he's a carpenter. He's got a good carpentry business. I don't know what carpenters did back then, but built houses or something, and I'm sure he had a following, a clientele and whatnot. And what's he supposed to do? They were really strict on a lot of the rules and things back then, and all of a sudden this store-bought bride of his turns up pregnant. Oh, yeah, right. Who's the Father? The Holy Spirit. Yeah, right. I can see that. Sure thing. Yeah. So he was afraid of disapproval. People not approving of him. And the questions that I have is, who are you afraid of? Whose disapproval are you afraid of? Or maybe even a better question is, whose approval are you constantly seeking? My parents have been dead for a long time, and I realize I'm still seeking their approval. There's a really good article. I don't have time for this story today. It'll show up in a sermon pretty soon, though. But football player Rashad Jennings, running back for the Giants, and he did great things. but he could never get his father's approval. He went on to win Dancing with the Stars, but he could never get his father's approval. And sometimes we go through life like that, trying to get approval from someone else. The next character are the shepherds. They had a fear of change. They knew that the new king would change the world forever. None of us like to be caught off guard. They had a pretty cushy deal. Go out and tend a few sheep, They didn't have a whole lot of predators that were going to be after them. They didn't have Kodiak bears. They had a lot of things. It was a pretty easy job being a shepherd back in those days. And they didn't know what was going to happen. They get a new king, the whole hierarchy could change. They didn't know what the future could bring. And we're like that. And sometimes I think that as we mature, we become even more resistant to change. Sometimes younger people can adapt to change easier than those of us with a few more miles on the tread. Next one is Herod, the king. Fear of losing control. Wait, what's it? A new king is born? I'm the king. Hey, we can't have a new king being born. None of us like to feel helpless with no control over events. So then we try to control other people. Then we try to influence and control other people. And what does this do? Produces worry. And what does worry create? More of what we don't want. We are focusing our creative energy on that which we do not want. And somewhere in here I have a quote from Ernest Holmes on worry. We must heal ourselves from worry. This tension is relaxed as we gain confidence in good, in truth, and in beauty. Step away from worry. And our fifth fearful character in our story is Zechariah. The fear of being disappointed. He and Elizabeth tried to have a baby. They've been trying for many, many years and were continually disappointed. And when the angel told him that Elizabeth was to bear a son, he didn't want to believe it because he didn't want to be hurt. He didn't want to be disappointed again. And so we go through lives. I'll never let anyone get that close to me again. I'm afraid that I will hope again. And so we put things away from us. So now the question is, how can we face fears in our lives today? And I think the first thing that we need to do is to recognize that we do have a fear. Sometimes we push that so far down, we don't realize that we have a fear. We don't realize that we're letting those voices from the past dictate to us. That we're letting those voices of the past tell us that we are really seeking that approval from someone long, long ago. So once we can acknowledge that there's a fear, then we can do something about it. And so I have a little 5-step process that we can go through. First of all, recognize that God is. Recognize that there is a power in the universe, and it doesn't make any difference what your belief system is. We honor the 9 traditions up here. We do all the other things. It doesn't make any difference what your tradition is. But for most of us, there is some type of a power in the universe. And for most people, as we look at that power is all-knowing, it is all-powerful, and it is all-present. It is present at every moment in time, at every point in space. And if that be the case, then that power must be within each and every one of us. We recognize that the nature of that infinite intelligence, that divine creative force, is good and that it is for us. We are not here to be tortured by some infinite thing up in the sky, but that power, that presence is operating for us and in our behalf. Second step, I am. I am one with that infinite presence. We're all, each and every one of us, children of the divine. Each and every one of us are made from that God stuff. We have the God DNA, if you will, within us. So all of the properties that we have that are within God are also within us. God does not experience fear. We don't need to experience fear. Each of us is powerful. Each of us is wise. Each of us is intelligent. None of us need another man's approval. And each of us has the ability to choose faith over fear. Third step is I know. Change is constant. The universe will not let us stay in one place for too long. We have the power to direct that change through the use of our mind, the use of our thought. We can never fear disappointment because we have the ability to create our own reality. The fourth step is one of gratitude. When we give thanks in advance for all of the good in our lives, we are creating the mold for that better experience. In almost all of the workshops we have, there is a section on gratitude. And I know that when I talk to people and we have sessions, gratitude is one of the most important things because it takes our mind off worry, that which we don't want, and allows us to focus on that which we do want, and then create more of that. Thanksgiving is so important. And then finally, release. We have to come to the place where we realize that we don't have to do all of everything. That it's not solely up to us. Yes, we have to take steps. We have to be involved. But we don't have to do all of everything. There is a divine presence that is with us, that is for us, that helps us to achieve those things. There is a divine presence that opens the door, that allows for that raise, that allows for that promotion, that allows you to be able to step beyond that addiction, to do all of the things that we need to do to have a more fulfilled life. And that is present with us. And so we can release all fear and set a new course for tomorrow. So what I want you to take away today, we all have fears, but fear doesn't need to control us. Fear doesn't need to define us. Through the use of affirmative prayer, we can always turn fear into faith. And so it is with that awareness that I ask my colleagues, the practitioners, to join me in holding our congregation in love and light and just simply recognizing that there is indeed an infinite power in the universe. One power, one presence, one life. And that life is the life of God. That life is my life. That is the life of each and every one of us. And that life is perfect because that life is the life of God. And it makes no difference what we are experiencing in this earthly plane, in terms of effects, whether it be dis-ease, whether it be lack and limitation, whether it be separation from God or separation from one another. We know that these conditions are temporary, that the permanent condition, the permanent capital T truth, is that we are all beloved children of God. And that infinite intelligence is working with us and for us to create a more abundant, a more beautiful, a healthy, loving life. And so for those of you who are experiencing those conditions, we just simply know that behind this temporary condition, there is a permanent truth. And it is that permanent truth which we claim. And so we just give thanks. We give thanks for the awareness of the power and the presence of God. We give thanks for all of the health, for all of the prosperity, for all of the love that is life. We give thanks, and now we can just step back and allow that divine current to work with us and through us to provide that more fulfilling life. We let it go, we let it be, and so it is.